Is another Padres blockbuster on the way? We will discuss in this edition of the On Friar podcast, following up the winter meetings that included some rumblings that maybe expanded our idea of what the possibilities could be for AJ Preller and company this offseason. This is the On Friar podcast. He is Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp. How does this Thursday afternoon find you, Derek?
Confused, per usual. Never know what AJ is going to do, so let's talk about it.
You know how people have that line like this meeting could have been an email? Have you heard people say that before? Like this could have been an email?
Oh, yeah. I feel that about most of our meetings.
These winter meetings could have been an email.
You know what? It means as long as these guys are getting together, like even if nothing actually was consummated, maybe they're laying the groundwork for stuff. Like they're talking, they're hanging out. It's you know what I have noticed though is since they started moving the winter meetings to some of these places that are real vacation spots, less and less happens. Like they're in Orlando, and Orlando is right there. I mean, and like Universal Epic Adventures is there now, and Disney World, and it's like less happens and people have more to go out and do with their families. It's weird. It's because let's start locking these guys up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and see how much.
I was going to say we need like a Toledo winter meetings. Then we'll have some real action.
Exactly. You're not going to go anywhere. They're going to hang out in the hotel and just be forced to do things.
I do like that they have it because, going back to last week, we're kind of grasping for straws in terms of things to talk about. And it always provides us some content and some talking points. And so I appreciate it from that standpoint. Love it when it's in San Diego. But it is funny. Like the world has changed. How we communicate has changed. It's not like we need to be in person for 20 people to be in a room together or 3 people to be in a room together or to be able to see and speak to one another. So these are things that can happen throughout the year. And so maybe there's a little bit less urgency to get things done on top of, like you said, the fact that Disney is right there, the beach is right there when it's in San Diego. There's a lot more to do, but I do like winter meetings. It's just this one came and went fairly quietly, although there are some things to discuss, and the Robert Suarez news today to kind of punctuate or put a button on these winter meetings. So we will talk about all that. Appreciate OG's a sponsor of the On Fire podcast. Thanks to OGs for all they do for On Friar and the NBC7 Sports Wrap team. They've even provided us with some dinners throughout football night in San Diego season, which we always enjoy. And if you need a place to catch college football playoff, bowl games, NFL, NBA, NHL, whatever your sport of choice is, OG is a great place to do it. A bunch of locations around San Diego County. Great menu, awesome beer list, and just a good place to hang. So appreciate OGs and all they do for us. Without further ado, the walk-up music. It is the On Friar podcast brought to you by NBC7. He is Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp. And before we go any further, and I wanted to do more on this, and it kind of snuck up on me, but I think it's worth at least acknowledging off the top, Derek. This is episode number 400 of the On Friar podcast. We love a good round number and a milestone, and we have reached 400, Derek. It's kind of crazy to believe.
It almost feels like we should be celebrating episode 420 for some reason, because more than this one, because I feel like should all just kind of sit around and just kumbaya a little bit after all the crap we've been through over these 400 episodes.
Yeah, well, maybe we get to 420 and we plan something for that one, because I've failed to get anything lined up for this edition, but started just about 7 years ago. I think spring training of 2019, and boy, we have seen and discussed a lot in those 7 years since. A lot has changed, but in some senses, maybe a lot is still the same. I mean, Manny Machado happened, Fernando Tatis Jr. happened. Big moves, big news, lots to discuss. I would imagine like this 7 years of Padres baseball, more interesting, compelling topics to discuss than like the 7 years of Padres baseball prior. I think that's probably a safe thing to say.
11 to 18. Yeah. That's you're not going out on a limb there, Darnay.
You had you had Will Myers, you had 2015, you had Eric Hosmer, but I've enjoyed being part of these 7 years and these 400 episodes and being a part of them with you, Derek, as well. And I've learned a lot about baseball and the Padres and all these things from having these conversations with you. So it's been fun, and obviously the guests that we've had, that's been really, really fun. And then having some interaction with viewers and listeners has added a lot to it as well. So thanks to everybody who's been a part of this in any way, shape, or form. We sure appreciate it.
This has been really fun. Get an avenue to just be able to talk about baseball for a while once a week. This is really cool.
Yeah, it has. All right, well, let's get to the talking baseball part of it. And hot and fresh out of the oven on the NBCSanDiego.com sports page, the headline: Trade Tatis, even Miller or Merrill. What are the Padres really waiting to do? And that penned by the one and only, yours truly, Derek Togerson. All right, Derek, I'll let you lead things off. Very little concrete news. What was it? Dyson Acosta on Monday, Robert Suarez to the Braves on Thursday, kind of bookending these winter meetings. But more than that, kind of the rumblings that have from the reporting of the Dennis Lins and Kevin Acey's reframing maybe what we thought was possible this offseason. What is of greatest interest or intrigue to you?
Well, when you start throwing around terms like bigger than the Soto trade, blockbuster, franchise altering moves, you go get that kind of catches your attention, right? So then you have to do a little analysis on, well, what kind of trades would rise to that level? Trading Jake Cronenworth doesn't count. Trading Jeremiah Estrada doesn't count, even though they'd be big moves. They'd be just substantial, certainly something to talk about, but they don't rise to that level. The only ones that could possibly get there, if all of this, just fall down this rabbit hole, see where it goes. And I doubt any of this is actually going to happen. The only way that you actually get there is if you trade someone like a Xander Bogaerts or Manny Machado, because the name recognition and the contract and the money involved, and neither one of those things is going to happen because both those guys have a no trade clause, and they just make too much money and they're on the wrong side of 30. So it would have to be basically it's a Padres salary dump. And they have to pay a bunch of it somewhere else anyway, or attach a massive prospect haul, which they probably don't have right now in the system. Those two are not happening. So then you go to the other side, and it is, I think, 3 players that you can look at that would be, this is the seismic shift in baseball. This is the shocker that everyone talks about for months on end. And it's you trade either Fernando Tatis Jr., Jackson Merrill, or Mason Miller. I mean, is there anybody I'm missing here that would rise to the level of this is the shocker to end all shockers in the baseball world involving the Padres roster?
No, I think all the guys that you listed, both in the category of this probably isn't happening and the category of, okay, maybe this is a possibility, and then like some collection, but Pavetta came up. You mentioned Jeremiah Estrada. People have wondered about Jason Adam just because, he makes more than Jeremiah Estrada. Jake Cronenworth, all these deals would be big, like from our kind of San Diego people around the San Diego Padres standpoint, but broader baseball world, no, those wouldn't, I think be, qualify as a blockbuster the way that obviously the Juan Soto trade did. Either of the Juan Soto trades did. And so, yeah, there is kind of a short list that would stack up to that. And I think you've touched on those names. I have some thoughts, but I don't want to, just.
It's a give and take. Go for it. Yeah, dive on in here.
Well, I think, okay, so with the New York Mets. None of it particularly good. Edwin Diaz ending up with the Dodgers. They lose Pete Alonso to the Orioles. Not knowing kind of the Mets fan base, not being in that media market, you see like, okay, guys that fans really liked and enjoyed are gone. Like, what are they going to do to build up some goodwill amongst the fan base? Obviously, restack the roster, bring in some talent. There's been some like Francisco Lindor chatter. I don't know exactly the origin of that. I think it's come up with Ben and Woods. I don't know if that was something that they discussed on their own or with a guest.
Very likely they didn't come up with that idea on their own.
The Lindor piece is interesting, but I also wonder, does that make it Less likely because I think there's another player that I think Mets fans enjoy. Now you've heard some rumblings of like, do he and Soto mix? Is this kind of similar to some of the situations we saw in San Diego where
Soto doesn't
Soto,
mix with anybody, so you're just gonna have to deal with that. He's
right?
there.
Yes. Lindor also has a considerable contract. I think he's got 6 years with a higher AAV than say Xander Bogaerts compared to the 8 years that I think you have left with Bogaerts and Manny Machado. And so maybe that's part of it. What I'm taking too long to get around to is there a world where there is a Mason Miller attached to a Manny Machado or a Xander Bogaerts to then bring in, obviously, the enticing part is Mason Miller. You do get a guy with some name recognition, obviously a bad contract, but who best equipped to handle a bad contract than Steve Cohen and the Mets? And maybe they rework a deal. Maybe there's some deferred money where you guys are getting all this money, but it's going to look a little bit different. Obviously, there's a no trade clause part of this, but you're playing in New York City. Like that's going to be good for business as well. Obviously, New York fans, Yankee fans have some familiarity with Xander Bogaerts and Manny Machado, given that they played in the AL East. And again, it's New York. I think a lot of athletes, there's some curiosity or interest in playing in the Big Apple. I get that. And so I wonder if there's a world where that type of trade makes sense. And then there's kind of the larger like philosophical discussion around the Padres about like, what are you willing to part with just to clear up some cap space? And without going too far into it, I find myself willing to part with a lot to clear up some cap space because that has just been an albatross over this franchise and their ability to do anything since 3 years ago when they signed Xander Bogaerts.
Francisco Lindor has turned 32. Francisco Lindor has finished in the top 10 of the MVP voting the last 4 years. Francisco Lindor is a switch hitting shortstop who is also just a great fun dude to have, which is probably why he is not getting along with Juan Soto, because he wants to be more fun loving and free. And that's definitely not what Juan Soto is. He's just very much his own guy. This idea has a lot of intrigue to it, and I'm certainly not opposed to it by any stretch of the imagination. The issue there is Francisco Lindor has a bigger contract than Fernando Tatis Jr. So why would it be that the Padres would attach Mason Miller to a smaller contract for a guy who's the same age? I don't think you have to do that. If the Mets are really trying to get rid of Lindor and his contract, why would they not be attaching something for the Padres? Because the Padres are the one taking on the bigger financial risk here.
That's that's the part that's kind of stumped me is like, does it make sense from a monetary standpoint for one or either of these teams? And that part I don't really know. And it doesn't solve that we need money to spend issue for the Padres. Now they would get out of Lindor's deal a couple years earlier than they would get out of Xander Bogaerts' deal. And then maybe they discuss a restructuring with Francisco Lindor where the average value is a bit more palatable and gives them a little bit more wiggle room. I also like, you need to get something back. Certainly. They have some significant holes to fill, but I am maybe like more reckless than I should be in terms of how little I'd be willing to get in return just to get the Xander Bogaerts trade off the books. Because obviously from the team that you're doing the deal with, like they owe you something, they should give you something. But the asset, the resource you get in return in financial flexibility from the Padres standpoint, whatever you do with that and whatever players you bring in a sense is part of the return from making that deal. And it has just been, I'm sure it's been frustrating for AJ Preller and to his own doing. Like we can't ignore the fact that like they were just a couple years from getting out of Eric Hosmer's deal and they lassoed themselves with an even worse contract that's been even harder to navigate. So I find myself sitting here like kind of whatever it takes. And we've said a million times, there's always this kind of caveat. We really enjoy covering Xander Bogaerts and I wanted to see him succeed. There's nothing I don't like about the guy.
Except his production. That's it.
Production based on how much money he's owed. And so I'm kind of like, and I really enjoy having Mason Miller on the Padres. Another guy that seems like a great dude and what an incredible talent. But I'm like, man, if that's what it takes to then open up $25 million a year and all the possibilities therein, and you can get something useful back from the Mets, this might be completely idiotic, and I will take that. But like, it's just been, again, it's an albatross on this franchise, and just an obstacle is probably a better word, a barrier to getting anything done. And so I'm like, sort of whatever it takes at this point, if that's going to make it easier to then kind of maneuver and figure out what you can do financially, I'd almost do anything at this point.
Okay, I get you. I see what you're saying. I really do. And I agree with you getting out of, unless for some reason Xander has a come to Jesus moment and he goes back to being 2017, 2018 Silver Slugger winning Xander Bogaerts, then the contract is fine. But short of that, no, he's making exponentially too much money and kind of creating a big hole in the lineup. And also, he was good defensively. He wasn't elite defensively. Here's the problem. He's still making $8 million a year less than Francisco Lindor. Lindor's got $32.4 million a year through 2031, and his luxury tax number is 34. So you're going from a 27 to a 26 to a 34. So that doesn't help you with your financial situation by any stretch of the imagination. Now it gives you better use of the money because Lindor is going to be worth more. Lindor is going to not be the problem that you have. But then it creates more of an issue with you being able to sign or negotiate or bring in other free agent players. So attaching a guy like Mason Miller, who's about to hit his first year of arbitration, who's expected to make right around $3.5 million this year, as arguably the most electric arm in all of Major League Baseball that handles the eighth and ninth innings some nights, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So if it's for something, if you attach Mason Miller, it's got to be for something else. You know, if you want to go straight up Francisco Lindor for Xander Bogaerts or have them give us some money on the back end for it, great. I'm totally up for that. I don't think the Mets would do it. But I can tell you that I say no to attaching Mason Miller to something like that, because that just, you don't have to. That doesn't make any sense for the Padres to do something like that when they're bringing in more money and giving up more assets.
So, and there's been two names I've thought of with this, and it's, you know, if we just did this exercise with Xander Bogaerts. You, in your mind, what does this exercise look like if it's Mason Miller and a Manny Machado, where the money is, it's
The
like
numbers
what,
line up.
31 for Manny, so it's closer to Lindor. It's one of the big contracts. Maybe Machado, I think, as a name, more cachet than a Xander Bogaerts. The production level.
Well, it also allows you to put him at third base and move Mark Vientos to first base. You don't have to worry about who's then taking over at third base because they don't have Pete Alonso now. So you're thinking Vientos is probably going to be the natural move over to first, but you don't know who's playing third. Well, you get Manny, you're playing third. You know exactly what's going on. So that would make a lot more sense to me. Again, with the numbers lining up, because then you can move, the Padres can then move Bogaerts to third and put Lindor at shortstop, and you're actually in pretty decent shape there. That would probably make a little more sense. But again, if you're doing that, then you're just straight up Machado for Lindor. I'm still not attaching Mason Miller to that.
Maybe you don't have to at the end of the day. But I just, with what has happened with the Mets, it has just made them, and the fact that it is a Steve Cohen team that has none of the financial hangups that the Padres have, it just seems like a really obvious trade partner in one way, shape, or form. And does include Miller, does include Machado, does include Bogaerts. I don't know, but I got to think something is there. And would they be the perfect team to take on one of these contracts that you hear about all the time that the Padres are, of course, going to need to shed? They need to save some money, this or that. Like, who better than a Steve Cohen team? And then it would be curious, like, what they do with the contract. Does it look any different? Or do they have so much money that they can just kind of
But here's the
stomach
thing,
it.
though. If the point is to get rid of a bad contract, right, which Xander Bogaerts is a bad contract, Manny Machado
Right.
is probably going to turn very quickly into a bad contract. If the point there is to get rid of a bad contract, is your goal then to bring back the same amount of money but on a less bad contract, or get rid of the bad contract and get younger and more talented?
And that's where I don't necessarily know like what the Mets would have to offer from like a prospect standpoint and that sort of thing. I'm not necessarily this started with Francisco Lindor. I'm not necessarily like dead set they have to get Francisco Lindor. I like Francisco Lindor. He's fun to watch. I think he would be a great fit in a lot of ways. But to me, it's kind of just like a broader, like the Padres are in this situation, the Mets are in this situation. Is there something there? Not necessarily like we need to get Francisco Lindor. He might
Well,
not be part
here's
of
the
it.
other part of this too: is if the Mets are so hell bent on willy nilly spending money everywhere, like you are asserting that they are, why they let Diaz and Alonso walk for, I mean, 33 and 30 million, 31 million bucks a year? That's
It's a great
not
question.
out of the question money for a guy like Steve Cohen. So if
Yeah.
they're all of a sudden going to bring in these random bad contracts, they just had a chance to sign two guys to good contracts. Yet
It's
they're
true.
going to be willing to bring in a bad contract just because they have the financial wherewithal to do that. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. I agree. Something's going on with the Mets that we don't understand. I don't know what that is. Cohen is all of a sudden hesitant to loosen the purse strings. Maybe he is going to reevaluate and double down on player development because buying all these players certainly has not worked for him. I agree. There's something weird going on at Citi Field right now. I don't think it is a desire to bring on more quote unquote superstars or big names under bad contracts, because they had a chance to bring back two fan favorites on decent contracts and they neglected to do such.
Good point. Maybe it's because they vastly overpaid for Juan Soto, and he's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
I need
I think
to
that's the
maybe
best thing.
rethink
Now
some
you're
things."
seeing why the Soto contract is so constricting, even for Steve Cohen. And we
Yeah.
said it the second he signed it, Darnay, we came on and said, this is a ridiculous contract. There's no this is stupid. Even for Steve Cohen, this is stupid. A year later, we're seeing how stupid it was.
Yeah. Okay, so that's been the thing that's like mostly top of mind for me. You mentioned Tatis in there, and we've kind of skirted the Tatis thing or teased the Tatis thing. You mentioned Tatis in your piece that people should check out on the NBC San Diego sports page. Do you want to share just kind of your thoughts and where you stand on Tatis at this point? Now, AJ Preller has all but said he's untouchable at this point.
When did he say that?
Reported by Kevin AC yesterday.
What were the words that AJ used?
Okay, let
Because
me.
remember, AJ, and again, we're going to start getting into pedantics and semantics here, because AJ is very good at saying things
Very
that
good.
in one context makes sense, but he's got a whole different context that is completely acceptable and reasonable as well. That's what I'm wondering. What were his exact words?
No, I understand. And the example I always think of was I think it's the off season before 2021, whereas after 2020, Lamet gets hurt, Clevenger gets hurt, and we're like, how are they going to fill all these spots in the rotation? We have a Zoom or something with AJ Preller, and he's talking about all the young talent. They had Ryan Weathers, they had Mackenzie Gore, really kind of like investing in those guys. And then what do they do around between Christmas and New Year's of 2020?
They go out and they get, let me see, Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell, and Yu Darvish.
And we're like, well, so much for that. And so that was early on in my career of covering AJ Preller. My example of just what you had to say. Just a few quotes from this piece from Kevin AC in the Union Tribune. There's a bunch of guys on our roster that we're not looking to have conversations about. He continues, if somebody wants to say, hey, would you do this? You're not going to just like cover your ears and hang up the phone immediately. And then there's a quote where it's like as much of a like firm stance as you're going to get. Where is it? Sorry, I'm struggling to find. So is he untouchable? ACS. Preller says, quote, he's somebody that we're not talking about. However you want to say that. If you want to say that's untouchable, you can say that. So That was kind of the
Yeah, no, what AJ actually, let me translate into AJism. What that means is if you want to say that, you can go ahead and say that, and I'm not
I'm
going to
not
stop
saying
you from saying
that.
that. Right. What we're not having conversations and we're not talking about him right now means no one has come to him with a viable deal yet. If someone comes to him with a viable deal, they will
Yes.
open those conversations. The other quote that I saw was, "We need Fernando." What that really means is we need Fernando to play like Fernando. If he's not doing that, we don't need that version of him. We need the 2021 version of Fernando Tatis Jr., where he's an MVP finalist hitting 42 home runs in 130 games. That's what we need. We need what we know Fernando can be. We don't need 6 WAR Fernando, who's one of the best defensive players at any position in all of Major League Baseball, but has these month-long, maddening, inconsistent spells at the plates. That's not the one we need. That's the one you want. That's the one you're happy to have. That's not the one you need. And this is the problem here. That's what makes it so scary to talk about trading this guy, because he's entering his age 27 season. And you just think the light's going to go off and he's going to flip that switch and go back to being 2021 Fernando Tatis Jr. with all the swag and all the everything he brings. And if that happens, there is no trade package that is worth what he brings if he is that guy. Problem is, he hasn't been that guy for 4 years now. So when do we get to the, okay, he's not ever getting back there part of the equation versus, okay, he's here now. Thank God we didn't make that deal because we've got this guy, the statue guy. Or, man, we held on to him too long. He's never going to get his head right. He's going to change a scenery candidate, and then we never get anything close to what we could have gotten for him. That's the gamble. That's where the game we're playing right now, and that's what we don't understand.
Yeah. A couple comments. What happened to whatever happened to statues? Manny is good enough for one. Tatis is good enough for one. The rest are not in terms of the Padres. Our buddy
The only
Roberto.
statue guy right now is Peter Seidler.
From Roberto, Tatis has a potential to be statue worthy, but has to be mature. But has
Boom.
to mature.
Exactly, Roberto. That's exactly it. If he gets, what did he say to me? It's at the Fan Fest, Darnay. If my head's right, I'm the best in the world in the baseball.
Second to none.
Second to none. And he's right. And he's right. I mean, take out Ohtani, and yes, that is accurate.
And I've wavered on this. Like, there was a point during last regular season where, like, gun to my head, I'd probably be like, all right, now might be a good time. It was probably like in June or July. You know, he went through the worst slump of his career, and as we've discussed, just looked downtrodden and tired, and just not the life, the joy wasn't there. And you know, I'm not at that place. You know, you ask, like, when is the right time? I don't think this is the right time. It's also kind of one of those, like, do you sell low? This feels fairly low. Not the lowest point of his career, certainly, but it feels fairly low.
And what's crazy is it feels low for him, but it's still high. Like, it's still high for most people. He's 26. He doesn't turn 27 until next year. Like, it's
in a few weeks.
He's got a palatable contract for the foreseeable future. Like, he's a slumbering giant of a superstar. And when he wakes up, you've got a guy who transforms your whole organization.
I mean, he probably, like, 5 best contracts of baseball in baseball. He's got to be one of them, right?
If he's living up to
Jackson Merrill might be there now.
Yes. No, if he lives up to what he's capable of, yes. But right ahead of him, though, is Jackson Merrill. That's a better contract.
Yeah. Maybe too good of a contract.
Right.
And the thing with
Acuna is probably the one you think about. 10 years, 100
true,
million.
yeah, 100.
Making $10 million a year. What the hell?
That's insane. But then I see, like, Tatis end of the year in what was defensively incredible, second straight platinum glove. And that's part of, obviously, his value. But you get to the end of the year, and, like, this guy who had a bad, for Fernando Tatis Jr. standards, bad offensive season, worst slump of his career, finished 8th in MVP voting. Like, imagine if he's just, like, a career average season. You're thinking top 5 MVP finalist on top of what he does defensively. And so I've probably been as close in the last 6 months as I've ever been to being like, maybe this makes sense. Maybe it's just kind of run its course. I'm not there now. I've cooled off that position, and I am hopeful with a manager that really knows him and has seen him at his best. Maybe Craig Stammen can kind of help pull something out of him. I think you hear what Stammen has said, what Preller has said, what Tatis has said. It all sounds a lot similar. Even what Tatis said to you guys in the clubhouse after that game 3 loss about like, there's so much more here and we need to get to it. And having that acknowledgement at least tells you something, because not to, this is dangerous for me to do because this could get you off on a tangent. We never heard that from Eric Hosmer. When Eric Hosmer was struggling and Kevin Acee was writing deep dives about it and quoting him, it was always like these, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I don't want to be unfair to Eric Hosmer, but it was like, you know, war and this and that and these metrics, and they don't, you know, there just didn't seem to be like that acknowledgement of like, I need to do better, I should be better. It seemed like he was frustrated in terms of the way that he was being evaluated. And like, there's been, I think, more acknowledgement from Tatis, like I should be better, I need to be better. And I'm like, let's see what happens in 2026. The contract is too good. He means too much to this team and to this fan base. I think the optics of a trade would be terrible. I think there's smart people around baseball could be like, okay, let me explain this to you. But like from an average fan standpoint, they're like, I love this guy. He's my favorite player. My kid has his jersey. This is why we show up. What are they doing? Are we going to go back to 2016, 2017? So there's that part of it as well. So I'm not on the trade Tatis train. Not to say that couldn't change. The maturity piece is part of it. Him understanding what he means to the guys in the clubhouse and his ability to lift the guys in the clubhouse, and then hopefully getting closer to that 2021 version or even 2024 plus. 2024 was like, as especially September into the playoffs, the closest we've seen. So that's my hope. I'm not on the trade Tatis place. And also, I think you've got a couple year window where that contract is going to look really, really good. So if 2026 is garbage and we get to this point, I still think that contract is such that a team would happily take that on.
I think giving him a year with Stammen is smart, because you're right. Craig has a very good relationship with him. And if anybody can walk up to him and kick him in the ass and say, pull your head out of your rear end, let's go, it's going to be Craig Stammen, which is something that, as we saw with Mike Schilt, he was unwilling to do with his veterans. He's a younger guy, a younger player guy. He wants to let the guys who have that, that resume kind of police themselves. And he's not going to go in there and be the guy who kicks him in the butt like that. Craig Stammen will. So, yeah, I agree that giving him a year with Stammen is probably a very good idea. And it's, again, unless you just get offered some Godfather deal where you're going, man, I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do with this, because this is going to give us 4-5 starters back. And that makes our roster maybe not as dynamic, but it's much more solid top to bottom. I don't foresee that happening either right now. So, yeah, it's so tough to assess these kinds of things, because it's hard to take emotion out of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's very, very difficult to take I love the guy. I've known him since he was 18 years old, covering him at spring training in 2018. Like it's hard to take that out. Some real fun, good conversations in the clubhouse that we've had, or this complex in Peoria. Like, removing all of that is difficult, and just looking at it completely in a vacuum of a baseball standpoint, you just hope that you keep him and he becomes who he was meant to be, right? That's what you hope. And if it doesn't work out, then you kind of work around the edges on that. I don't know, man. This one's tough. This one is really tough. I do agree with you though on the he's at least tried to take responsibility for things, unlike Hosmer, who thought it was he was AC's mole in the clubhouse, getting all that information and stuff. So that's why Kevin was always trying to defend him in those things. He didn't want to tick him off and then lose his tie to what was going on behind the scenes, because those two little moles were in cahoots. And then Eric realized that he wanted to not try to be a good baseball player. He wanted to, smoke weed and drink bourbon the whole time instead. And so that's just what it is. That's what Eric Hosmer wanted, and that's what Eric Hosmer did. So there's, allegedly. So there's that was the difference. Tatis he's got different vices, but they're not ones that typically take away from your ability to play baseball.
I feel like I need to have like a disclaimer when Derek goes on a rant. The thoughts and opinions of Derek Togerson don't necessarily reflect the thoughts and opinions of Darnay Tripp and the On Friar podcast.
Oh, you mean you don't want to be right? No,
I don't want to be right. I don't want to, whatever it is. I don't know.
And you knew when you threw that out there that I can't help myself when it comes to Eric Hosmer. It's like catnip, man.
I know.
There's just rage baiting.
Let's get you off of it with some comments from Chip Rock. Cease gone, Suarez gone, Schultz gone, King will definitely be gone soon. Boy sure does feel like a fire sale, even if they aren't calling it one, but it's here. We knew these things were coming.
Fire sale is when you're actively sending assets out of town.
Yeah.
This is just letting guys walk who are not under contract.
Yeah, I don't know if I see it as a fire sale. We all knew this was coming for like a year now.
Yeah, and again, believe me, I know. I remember. I know, like 93, 94, fire sale, 99, 2000, fire sale. Like it's even 2010, because Adrian Gonzalez was gone, fire sale. Those are the ones that we, as Padres fans, we all think about. This is a little different dynamic.
Yeah. From Sandy on Facebook. Thanks for watching, Sandy. The Padres have no farm system to trade from due to the Mason Miller trade, among others. The only tradable player is Tatis. People say maybe they trade Jackson Merrill, but I don't think he makes a lot of money to dump.
And that's the key with Jackson Merrill is the contract.
Yeah.
That makes him more desirable.
Yeah, and same thing with Mason Miller, same thing with Jeremiah Estrada. On one hand, you're not freeing up money, but if you're just dumping one of those guys for the sake of dumping them, you could get the contract is so attractive that's going to help you in terms of the return. I can't imagine. Go ahead.
Let's do a hypothetical. Okay. If I were to come to you, and people can get in the comments on this as well. If I were to come to you and say, Darnay, you have to trade one player. And for that one player, you can get back a left-handed starting pitcher with serious strikeout stuff, a shortstop and an outfielder who will both go to an all-star game before they turn 25, and a 21-year-old prospect pitcher with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. What would you say?
I was looking at Padres players initially, but then there was the prospect is that. So are these outgoing players from the Padres?
No. These are the Padres trade one guy to get this back.
Oh, one guy to get this back?
Yes.
And who I would like to see go out the door?
Well, no, I'm saying if you could make that deal, like what would you say?
Probably.
What if I tell you that one guy, Jackson Merrill? Exactly. Now you're going, wait a minute.
Does this trade exist? Is this a real world? Do you have a team in mind?
What I just quoted you was the Juan Soto trade.
It
is Mackenzie Gore, CJ Abrams, James Wood, and Yarlin Susana. That is the lefty with serious strikeout stuff, all-star. Wood and Abrams both went to an all-star game before they were 25. And Susana is 21-year-old with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball who's a top 100 prospect already. That's the Soto deal that they sent to Washington to get him, with 2.5 years left on his contract. Merrill's got 8. You see, so you're talking about that's at least the haul you're getting back, is that caliber of player. Okay, and this is the thing. This is the point I was trying to get to. Is if I were to say you're going to get all of those guys for one player, you'd go hell yes. And then I tell you that one player is Jackson Merrill. You go, wait a minute, let's not be hasty, because Jackson Merrill means that much to this organization.
I understand it from the how much time you have left with Juan Soto and the fact that you'd have to pay him standpoint versus Jackson Merrill being locked in at the rate he is for the length of time that he is. Mm-hmm. But I don't know about Juan Soto or Jackson Merrill getting the Juan Soto return. Juan Soto had accomplished
Juan
Soto had accomplished a lot at this rate in his career. Like I remember that trade deadline, like literally nobody in baseball history with Juan Soto's mix of age and accomplishments had ever been traded before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I struggle with that with Jackson Merrill, who I like a lot, but Juan Soto, from like an accomplishment cachet standpoint, was in a different plane. But like you said, the monetary, financial, team control part of it is different.
Jackson Merrill, is he the same hitter that Juan Soto is? No, but who is? And by the way, the last couple of years, he hasn't been far off from Soto. He's entering his age 23 season, tied up for 8 more years, and is an exponentially better defensive outfielder at a premium position in center field than Soto is. And he's great in the clubhouse. Like, he's exactly the kind of guy that you want around all your other players, right? Like, you're talking about 2.5 years of Soto versus 8 years of Jackson Merrill, who had he not gotten hurt last year, would have been an all-star again and would have been a top 7, 8 MVP guy.
Yeah.
So you get at least the Juan Soto return. But here's the problem. It's Jackson Merrill. And you look at this guy and you talk to him, you see the attitude that he has, and he's sitting there at the SDFC games pounding beers, and the whole fan base loves the dude, and everybody in the clubhouse thinks he's fantastic because he is. He's going to be the leader of that team. He's the foundation. He's got the perfect ball player mentality. And you go, I don't even think I'd do it for that, for this guy, because he is not Tatis, not Miller. Jackson Merrill is the one guy on this roster. I would say it doesn't matter what you give me, I'm not trading him. End of discussion. He's your untouchable guy. That's the only one that I would say, no, he means too much. He means too much in the clubhouse and on the field. Sorry, hands off.
One quick comment, and then something along those lines that I wanted to discuss, and you're kind of teeing me up here. The quick comment is, isn't it funny how nobody won either of the Juan Soto trades?
Yeah, because King's not going to be here anymore. I mean, unless Randy Vasquez wins a Cy Young this year, and the Padres definitely did.
And the Nationals are getting rid of, potentially getting rid of CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore. Now you can maybe look at James Wood if he ends up being like a long-term pillar MVP candidate. That could be your answer right there. But it feels like everybody is a loser when Juan Soto is traded. But what I wanted to get to was the Jackson Merrill component, because another thing that we heard was when Craig Stammen spoke on Monday, discussing a couple of things that are related. One being the WBC and Tatis and Machado being gone, and navigating that, and the challenges that it presents and all that. And Stammen said, well, one thing it does that can be a positive is guys have to step up in leadership roles in the clubhouse while they're gone. And they kind of find their voice from that standpoint. And those guys come back and they're like, okay, we don't necessarily need to throw our weight around. We can kind of get on board and this thing is grooving. Okay, so who's one of those guys that to this point, not on a WBC roster, that could be around and assert himself as a leader? Jackson Merrill. And when Craig Stammen was asked, like, what would you like to see in year 3 from Jackson Merrill? And what he went to was, and he told this great story about when he was on a rehab assignment in Lake Elsinore and he was doing PFPs, and he was like, who was running those PFPs? 18-year-old shortstop Jackson Merrill. And he was chirping, he was telling guys what to do, he was getting after them, he was challenging them. And he was like, at that moment, he's like, this 18-year-old runs this clubhouse. It is his team. And he said, when you come in, you got these big personalities, takes you some time, you don't want to overstep. And he's like, at year 3, I think that's all out of the way. He can be who he is now. And this is coming after, I believe it was an AC piece earlier in the offseason talking about, leadership, and maybe they like Jackson Merrill, Ramon Laureano, the cut of their jib and kind of their attitude shaping the clubhouse. And so I wonder how much of a shift we see from that standpoint when Fernando Tatis Jr., there's a lot we like about him. We don't consider him a clubhouse leader in the conventional sense of a clubhouse leader. Manny Machado, I think he's grown up and shown some instances of that, but maybe seen some instances where, okay, I don't know if you really have the voice or I'm struggling to find the right words, but instances where it's like, come on, man, is that really?
Manny doesn't have the consistency because he can't. He's like me with Eric Hosmer. He can't help himself. Eventually, he has to say something stupid.
And so I do wonder what that looks like now. And look, say what you want about Eric Hosmer. Like, he was what, Papo, in the clubhouse up until like the 22 season. Like he was kind of viewed as that de facto clubhouse leader. It didn't have to be Tatis. It didn't have to be Machado. Machado didn't really kind of morph into that guy. And maybe at points in 2020, there was the whole situation with Tatis, and he kind of led when they came back to Petco Park and talked about it. Like Machado was doing the talking there. And since Hosmer left, we've seen him kind of assume more of that role. But those guys didn't necessarily have to be those guys early on in their Padres tenure. Maybe with time spent in the clubhouse, it makes sense for them to be. But I do wonder how long before it's like, who's the clubhouse leader? Well, it's Joe Musgrove and it's Jackson Merrill. Yu Darvish is certainly there. Jake Cronenworth, if he's still on the team, is certainly there. Machado has a piece in it. Tatis is the spark plug, maybe the emotional leader, but Jackson Merrill's that dude.
I think that's this year. I honestly do. I think Jackson Merrill has proven himself now, especially with the way that he's performed in the postseason the last 2 years. Who was the guy that got that home run to try and stave off elimination in the ninth inning at Wrigley Field in October? Jackson Merrill. Mm-hmm. That's the guy. That's the guy who comes up at the biggest of moments. As long as he can stop bunting, we'll be fine.
Well, he doesn't have Mike Shilton in his ear anymore.
Yep. I honestly do believe that transition not just begins, but completes itself. It comes through its entire process this season. This is going to be Jackson Merrill's team by the end of this year. And again, Joe Musgrove will handle the pitching staff, and Jackson Merrill will handle the offense. And both of those guys are going to be in complete control of this thing. And then Manny can kind of be the guy who's over doing his little quirky things over here, and Toddy can be the guy who the thing that Jackson Merrill can do if he's in charge is when Toddy goes into his emotional funks, it can bring down the entirety of the clubhouse, right? Because he, as you said, he's such a strong, massive personality that when things are going well, everybody's stoked. And when things are going poorly, he can suck the energy out of the room. But as Jackson Merrill takes over, Jackson is so even keel and always like, I went 0 for 75. If I got a baseball game to play today, let's go get him. It doesn't phase him. And that's the attitude and atmosphere that's going to rub off on the rest of the clubhouse. Is nobody cares if you're 18 for 20 or 0 for 20. Go out and do your damn job and enjoy it because you get to spend another day in the big leagues. That's Jackson Merrill's attitude. That's what every clubhouse needs to have. So I think by the end of this year, he'll be able to counteract whatever, dark cloud Tatis has going on to be able to contain it to his locker and not the entirety of the clubhouse.
Yeah. I do think like nobody's words will carry more weight still than Manny Machado, but he can also kind of pick his spots in terms of when he wants to kind of deliver that message.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a day-to-day, everyday thing. Now, we're probably going to still want to talk to Manny Machado in most instances, but there was always Manny there. There was Manny there. And then there was also Eric Hosmer. And so it was just kind of like the state of the clubhouse. Like you'd go to Eric Hosmer and he'd kind of give you like an idea, a pulse of what was going on. That doesn't necessarily need to be on Manny Machado's shoulders. But if Manny Machado wants to say, pay that man, to about a Joe Musgrove, or I'm sure there's other, memorable Manny quotes. There's been issues where, he's times where he said like, I need to be better. There's been those moments with Manny Machado. But I don't know how much interest he has in being kind of the day-to-day spokesperson for the San Diego Padres clubhouse. I would guess if you gave him some truth serum, he would gladly relinquish that to somebody like potentially a Jackson Merrill, who seems to have that demeanor. And it seems like the club would like him to also take that on as well, which might be even more important.
Oh, no question. No question. And as you said, Craig Dan, that's a great story about seeing him at Lake Elsinore. Like some people are natural leaders, and that's Jackson Merrill's personality. He's a natural leader. Some people are thrust into leadership roles and will do it, but don't particularly like it or take to it. And that's Manny Machado. And that's the difference. You want a natural leader in that position, and they've got one now.
Comments from Chip Rocks. Manny has always wanted to play in New York. Granted, it was the Yankees, but we'll settle for the Mets. So
would he waive the no trade clause for the Mets?
Yeah.
Certainly possible. And Xander Bogaerts, same thing. Xander also has a no trade clause.
Yeah. Let's see. Miller would be the one I'd trade. Relievers can be had, and this fan base still can't see how Preller is and how quickly we forget what we gave up for Miller. You'd kind of be sacrificing Leo DeVries essentially for that financial flexibility.
If that's the
If
case, you're going to have, remember what they gave up for him. You're going to
Yeah.
have to get at least that. I mean, or it's because now Mason Miller has an even better track record. Now Mason Miller has what he did in the playoffs. He's got a postseason track record where he looked like he was literally unhittable, which he was, where he's pumping 104.5 mile an hour fastballs on the outside black to Carson Kelly and making the Cubs go, what the hell is this? This is not human. You know, he's got an immaculate inning where he threw nothing but 9 sliders. You know, he's shown 2+ pitches. Now you can get even more for this guy because he's showing what he can do in the biggest of moments. There's no pressure pitching in Oakland or Sacramento. There's pressure pitching at Wrigley Field in October, and he did that and got better. So yeah, now Mason Miller's worth even more.
That he did. From Paul Stevens on Facebook, getting older and contracts are ridiculous. I see another 5 to 6 years rebuilding coming again.
If we can keep this going for another 5 or 6 years, I'll take it and hit the rebuild.
Another 400 episodes, Eric.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Yeah.
From Roberto, for it to be a fire sale, we need to get something back, like the fire sale in 2015.
Yeah, something back, something. I mean, even in '90, you know, when they traded Gary Sheffield, they got an unheralded reliever named Trevor Hoffman back. So yeah, there's something's got to get back, even if you don't know it's something in that moment.
It just seems like one of these contracts eventually has to go out the door. The other thing too, I thought from the sale, and another opportunity to potentially open some can of worms. And I don't know the answer to this question, but like the potential sale, is somebody buying the contract? Wouldn't they want somebody like a Fernando Tatis Jr. on the team?
See, I thought about this too, and that's a very good question. It's a fascinating question because it's going to depend on what does the owner value. What is the new ownership value? Do they value stability and long-term winning? Do they value star power? I mean, look at Steve Ballmer with the Clippers. He wants superstars around him, right? It's not working, but he went out and got Chris Paul. Didn't work. James Harden, Kawhi. He wants Bradley Beal. He wants stars around him, and then hope it works. That's what he would value. He would value having a Fernando Tatis Jr. on the team. Stan Kroenke wants to go and put in an organization that is so sound that it works. Look at their defense. You know, now they went out and they got, you know, they drafted Puka Nacua. He became a star. They went out and got Matt Stafford, and they went out and got Devontae Adams. They made a trade for, you know, who else are they? Jalen Ramsey, you know, to win a Super Bowl. But other than that, he has been very much I want depth in my organization. I want organizational stability because that leads to victories. And if getting that contract off the books helps you with organizational stability, maybe that's what they value more. So it's going to really depend on how each individual potential owner views the business model and how they want to run things. So it could be a massive feather in your cap, but it could be something they just don't give a damn about at all. We just don't know.
It's all fun at the very least because, again, you go back like a week or two and we're like, I don't know what this team can really do. And then after the last week, we're like, okay, they might be willing to do more than we realized.
Yeah.
It opens up some interesting possibilities and some areas to address needs in creative ways, and maybe an opportunity to kind of free up some money because they have been, you know, they've had to tighten their wallets since really the Bogarts deal, and they haven't had the ability to kind of do much in the free agency space, or even like I've also thought, you know, if they get some money off the books, well, they're doing it at a point where like a lot of the free agents, now granted, some guys don't sign until February, but like, you know, Schwarber and Pete Alonso, guys have started signing. And so you kind of miss the window from that standpoint. But then it opens up more trade possibilities for guys that you're like, well, he makes too much money. They could never trade for him. Well, they could. They might not be able to do it through the free agency market, but it opens up trade possibilities, up through the trade deadline that wouldn't ordinarily be there when you're thinking, well, whatever they do, we talked about at the trade deadline, whatever happens, they have to stay at the same level. That might not, necessarily be the case. And then if they do a trade like that and you're like, well, okay, well, are you going to bring a star back? That might not necessarily happen right away, but what happens at the deadline, what happens next offseason, you at least feel like there's some possibilities moving forward that do not exist now.
I just can't help but think back to 2004. Middle of the season, the Red Sox traded Nomar Garciaparra, who was far and away their most popular player. He was the guy. He was the fan base loved him, and everyone thought they were crazy. And they went out and they got Doug Mankiewicz and Orlando Cabrera, two of the best defensive players at their positions. And that was what they needed to win a World Series and break that 86-year drought of not having one. So sometimes doing the unpopular thing is the smart thing. And that's something we also have to keep in mind here is, would it suck to trade a guy like Toddy? Yes. Would it suck to trade? Yes. Yes, it would. It may end up in the long run being the better thing for the organization. And that's why I don't envy AJ Preller for being in this position whatsoever, because he's going to have to weigh that. And I guarantee you, he is fully cognizant of the fact that if he trades someone with that much adoration with the fan base, he had better damn well bring back a World Series trip this year, because if not, it is going to blow up right in his face.
Great note to end on. Well said, Derek. Thank you. Thanks for everybody watching and listening and being part of this for 400 episodes. And we will be with you next time for episode 401.